You kneel, quietly, in the cool hush of a stone cell. The walls are bare, except for a wooden cross, a straw mat, and a single clay flute, unfinished, resting beside a beeswax candle. The smell of damp stone and faint sandalwood fills the air, mingling with the earthy tang of raw clay. You're not a luthier. You're not even a trained musician. You're a monk. A brother bound to silence more often than speech, to prayer more often than comfort. But tonight, you're shaping something else. Your hands are rough from work in the garden. Clay sits beneath your fingernails. And yet, with each careful breath, you smooth the hollow form of the flute, like molding prayer itself into a vessel. You're not sure where the idea came from, perhaps a whisper from God, or perhaps from deep within the ache you've carried for years. You've always struggled with spoken prayer. The words tangle. The rhythms confuse. But breath you understand. So you shape the clay, press it gently, make a curve for the fingers, and bore a channel for air. You don't speak. You don't sing. But in your heart, the Ave Maria is already playing. And when you raise it to your lips, not yet fired, not yet ready, you can already imagine what it will sound like. A rosary not of words, but of wind. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, have you ever tried praying with music instead of words? Or has silence ever brought you closer to God than speech? I hope that through my sharing, you will gain a clearer understanding of your own situation or that of your loved ones, along with ways to overcome the challenges you may be facing. I wish you success, happiness, and peace. The next morning, you bring the flute to the kitchen ovens, whispering a prayer to Saint Cecilia, patroness of musicians, that it doesn't crack. It's not easy convincing the cook. But she lets you tuck it between the loaves, and by Vespers, you hold in your hands something holy, simple, warm, and ready. That night, as your brothers pray the rosary aloud in unison, you remain silent. And when the beads begin, you raise the flute. The first note, fragile, a little off. But the second, it holds. And the third, you can feel it vibrate through your ribs. Like a quiet bell rung deep inside you. Historians still argue whether clay flutes were ever used in formal liturgy. Some claim ancient shepherds used them to mimic birdsong. Others believe they were toys for children, or tools for beggars. But here, now, it is a prayer. And it belongs to you. You don't play hymns. You play the rhythm of the rosary. One note for each Hail Mary, a longer tone for the Our Father, and a held silence for the Glory Be. It's not just sound, it's structure. Breath becomes bead. Note becomes offering. You wonder if Mary listens differently when the words come as wind. The next evening, you sit in the choir stall with the others. Candles flicker. Psalms are whispered. And as the rosary begins again, you lift the flute once more. This time, there's no hesitation. The notes move like smoke through the air, soft, breathy, imperfect. But that's the point, isn't it? You're not performing. You're praying. And breath, no matter how broken, still counts in heaven. Across the aisle, Brother Matthias squints at you. He's old, half-deaf, and allergic to most things poetic. He leans toward Brother Tomas and mutters something. Tomas shrugs. The sound continues. Note by note, bead by bead. A few of the novices glance over, eyes wide. Not judgmental, curious. You see it, the tilt of their heads, the way their fingers pause before reaching the next bead. They're listening. But not everyone is pleased. After the prayer ends, Brother Matthias approaches you in the cloister. The rosary is for recitation, he says flatly. Not invention. His voice is clipped like dried lavender, all edge and no aroma. This is not a concert hall. You bow your head. You don't argue. You simply say, "It helps me pray." Historians still argue whether music was ever fully welcomed into monastic prayer beyond chant. Some point to the rigid rules of the Benedictines, who feared the flesh might rise with melody. Others note the silent monks who hummed psalms in their sleep. But most agree, where there is breath, there is the possibility of worship. The next day, a quiet surprise. Brother Tomas asks if he can try the flute. You hand it to him. He tries to blow and nearly swallows the thing. You chuckle, softly. He tries again. A single note slips out, thin and nervous, like a student raising his hand too early. He smiles. It's harder than it looks. You nod. So is prayer. The days pass. Word spreads. Not of rebellion, but of curiosity. One evening, a brother joins you with a lute. Another with a small drum made from goatskin. No one says much. But the rhythm of the rosary begins to feel less rigid. Less memorized. More alive. You still play the flute alone during your prayers. The rosary remains your guide. But the notes are changing. Evolving. On the third week, the abbot sends for you. You trudge up the spiral stairs, heart thudding like a bass drum. You expect correction. Or worse, silence. Instead, he says, "I've received word from the bishop." Your stomach flips. He heard you've been praying with a flute. The abbot leans forward. He wants to hear it himself. You swallow hard. Is that permitted? The abbot's mouth twitches, not quite a smile. No rule forbids breath. You leave the room a little lighter than you entered. Back in your cell. You lay the flute across your palms and say a prayer you've never said before. Lord, may this clay carry your whisper farther than my words ever could. You arrive in the chapel before dawn. As instructed. The bishop's visit wasn't meant to disrupt the monastery's rhythm, but of course it has. Everyone's awake early. Candles burn a little brighter. Robes are a little straighter. Even the incense smells heavier, like it's been doubled for effect. You're seated near the altar, clay flute in hand, fingers twitching just slightly. The bishop hasn't even entered the chapel yet. And already you feel the weight of 100 years of tradition pressing into your spine. You take a deep breath. The rosary begins. You start with a single note, long, hollow, almost trembling. It doesn't try to outshine the spoken prayers around you. It slides beneath them, supporting them like roots beneath a cathedral floor. The bishop listens in silence from his seat. You glance once. He's still. No raised brow. No disapproving whisper. Then, as the first mystery closes, you offer a soft trill, your version of the Glory Be. You hear one of the novices gasp, quietly. You smile. Historians still argue whether instruments were used in private rosary devotions during the medieval period. While chants were accepted, melodic tools, especially flutes, were often linked with the secular. Yet records exist of clay ocarinas being buried with monastics, suggesting something more sacred than people let on. As the Rosary continues, you let the notes breathe. They do not interrupt. They do not boast. They move like breath itself, sometimes thin, sometimes warm, but always returning. By the final decade, your heart slows. The chapel has changed. The prayers feel fuller, somehow. Not louder, just deeper. And when the last note fades, you lower the flute and bow your head. Silence follows. Then, footsteps. The bishop rises. You brace yourself. He stands beside you, looks down, not at you, but at the flute. Then he says, simply, "You have turned breath into a kind of incense." You don't speak. You don't need to. He nods. Walks away. No rebuke. No applause. Just presence. That night, in your cell, you add 2 notches to the side of your flute, one for the mystery of joy, and one for the mystery you didn't expect, being heard without asking to be. You begin syncing your breath to the Hail Marys, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. One for each word. You're surprised how natural it feels. How each prayer becomes a note, and each note a heartbeat. The next day, the abbot gives you a pouch of fine clay from the northern riverbank. For practice, he says. You know what that means. And so you begin crafting a second flute, not to replace the first, but to offer the prayer to someone else. A younger monk. A frightened novice. Someone whose voice trembles when they try to say, Hail Mary, out loud. You shape the clay slowly. Reverently. You know now that breath is more than survival, it's devotion in disguise. You pause. Run your fingers over the cool flute surface, and whisper. Hail Mary, full of grace. You don't finish it aloud. Your fingers do that part now. You step into the courtyard after evening prayer. The sky awash in bruised lavender and gold. The air smells of pressed lavender and wood smoke, the last of the cook's fire curling through the cloisters. You carry your flute, not to play it, but to hold it. It has become less of an instrument now, and more like a bead in its own right. A physical reminder of every prayer you never quite said aloud. A brother limps by. Hand pressed to his lower back. He nods at you, then at the flute. That little thing doing more good than confession these days. You laugh. Depends who's listening. He pauses. Mind if I sit for a while? I don't want words tonight. You gesture to the bench, and he lowers himself beside you with a groan and sigh only monks and donkeys have perfected. You raise the flute and begin, not a melody, not even a scale. Just breathy tones, one for each avenue. The rhythm is slow. Unrushed. The kind of tempo you only find in old churches and older habits. He doesn't speak again. Just breathes. Historians still argue whether monastic communities ever embraced musical instruments for healing. Some records show flutes used to calm epileptic fits. Others were banned outright. But even then, breath and tone have always held something deeply human. Healing without force. Calm without medicine. The next day, a sister from the nearby convent arrives. She brings with her a sick child, pale, limp, unable to speak. You don't ask questions. You just kneel, play the softest sequence you can. No miracle happens. But the child smiles. And sometimes, that's enough. Later, you find a note left beside your sleeping mat. No name. Just a sentence in charcoal. Your rosary brought me back to prayer. You hold it for a long time, then tuck it inside your psalter, next to the Magnificat. In the weeks that follow, more requests come. Play for my brother, he's anxious. My fingers can't hold the beads anymore, will you breathe them for me? Could you play the sorrowful mysteries for someone who's forgotten joy? You begin carving new flutes. Not to perform. To pass on. Each one shaped by hand, prayed over before it's fired in the oven, marked with a cross near the mouthpiece. They go out quietly, no fanfare. A gift of rhythm for those who no longer remember how to count Hail Marys, but still want to offer something. The Abbey is still divided. Some think you're inspiring. Others, dangerous. A few whisper that rosary beads are not meant to sing. You disagree. You think they always did. They just needed someone to give them breath. That night, you play again alone, under the grape arbor. Stars watching, air still. You begin with the joyful mysteries and end in quiet reverence. A soft rustle behind you. The abbot again. He says nothing for a moment, then asks. What mystery did you just finish? The fifth joyful, you say. He nods slowly. Sounded like the presentation to me. You smile. That's when you know, it's no longer your flute. It belongs to the prayer now. By now, the flute has traveled farther than you ever imagined. Not physically, it's still in your hands, most days, but through whispers, through silence, through breath. It's found its way into the hearts of brothers who once scoffed, into the pockets of novices too shy to speak aloud, and into the hush of sick rooms where even words have worn thin. But not everyone is soothed by your quiet song. One morning, after lauds, you're called again to the abbot's quarters. You know the way by heart now, the worn spiral of stone steps. The tiny window glowing faintly with cold light. This time, the bishop is there. So is another man, robed not in wool, but in the deep red of a cardinal. He doesn't sit. The rosary, he begins, is a vocal prayer. You nod. And what you are doing, he trails off, looks at the flute lying on the abbot's table. Is not what was passed down. You say nothing. The abbot clears his throat. With respect, Your Eminence, his prayer draws no attention to himself. It's soft. Sacred. The cardinal lifts the flute, turning it between his fingers like a relic, or an offense. There is danger in novelty. You speak at last. There's also danger in silence that has no breath. He looks at you, long and hard. Then, with a faint nod, he places the flute back on the table and leaves without another word. Historians still argue whether the Church ever formally addressed the use of music in personal rosary devotion. The documents are vague, and the practice often lived in shadows, among shepherds, widows, and wandering friars who couldn't read but knew how to pray through humming. You are one of them now. That evening, you don't play. You sit in the chapel, hands folded. The flute wrapped in cloth beside you. You wait. And when the last candle burns low, you feel it, a shift in the air. As if the chapel itself misses the sound. You unwrap the flute. You don't blow a melody. You play just one note. A breath. A heartbeat. It is enough. Later, you craft a new instrument, this one shaped slightly differently. with holes placed in a spiral instead of a line. You name it, the decade. 10 holes. 10 prayers. One breath at a time. The abbey clock ticks on. Seasons turn. And the music changes too, not louder. Not fancier, but more familiar. The brothers no longer ask if you'll play. They ask when. Sometimes, during rosary walks, you lead at the front, flute in hand. Prayers carried not by words but by rhythm. You see the old monk who once dismissed you now holding a small clay whistle in his own robes. You nod. He nods back. No words needed. And now, when people visit the abbey and ask, "What's that sound?" the answer is simple. That's the rosary, just spoken in wind. Years pass, as they always do, gently and without permission. Your beard grows silver. The brothers grow quieter. And the flute stays the same. It doesn't crack. It doesn't fade. It just waits, faithfully, until breath finds it again. You now rise slower from your mat in the mornings, but your hands still move with purpose. The younger brothers look to you not as an oddity, but as a keeper of something ancient. Something delicate. Something alive. One evening, a new novice arrives, barely 20, eyes wide, voice too timid to rise in communal prayer. You recognize that fear. You once wore it yourself. So, without a word, you place a small wrapped cloth in his hands. He unwraps it. A flute, simple, unfinished. Unfired. You say only this: when you can't speak your prayer, breathe it. Historians still argue whether this quiet tradition ever left the abbey. Some claim it was buried with you, entombed in candlelight and dust. Others say that monks carried the flutes across Europe, silent music passed from cell to cell, prayer to prayer. One theory even suggests a certain melody, played at Lourdes in the 19th century, echoes a tune traced back to your first decade flute. But truth? Truth doesn't always need proof. Sometimes it just needs to be lived. Eventually, you grow too frail to lead the rosary walks. You sit beneath the arbor instead, listening as others take up the song. You no longer need to play, the prayer has passed beyond you. The sound of breath through clay now lives in many hands. The flute rests beside you as you doze in the sun. And when you wake, a brother is playing, not perfectly, but with heart. The same way you began. You smile. Later, in the chapel, you kneel one last time with your fingers wrapped around the rosary, smooth beads in one hand, flute in the other. You whisper the joyful mysteries, but only in your mind. Your breath is too shallow now to sing through clay. But the prayer is there. And it is whole. A final thought passes through you: the rosary was never about the voice. It was always about presence. You exhale. A soft wheeze. A final amen. Years later, the flute remains in the chapel. No plaque. No name. Just a simple inscription scratched near the mouthpiece. Breath unto prayer. Prayer unto peace. And still, sometimes, if the chapel is quiet enough, someone picks it up. And plays. The chapel is dark now. Only one candle flickers near the altar. Its light dancing across worn stone and quiet benches. The air is still, hushed, not with fear, but with reverence. Outside, the night sky stretches like a prayer itself, endless and open. You close your eyes and imagine that first note. The breath before the music. The silence before the prayer. You can feel it in your chest even now, a calm pressure. Like the hush that falls just before something holy begins. You've walked this story slowly. No rush. Just one mystery, one breath, one moment at a time. And maybe, just maybe, something in you softened too. Maybe the tightness in your shoulders eased. Maybe your own prayer, spoken or silent, rose again tonight, if only by a note. So let this stillness remain a little longer. Let the candle burn a few more minutes. Let your breath be the only sound. And know this, you are heard. Whether in chant or in whisper, in beads or in flutes, your prayer is not lost. It drifts like incense. It rises like wind. And it returns like peace. Sleep well, dear soul.